But were there lax border policies to blame for allowing these foreign nationals into that country in the first place? Well, joining me now to debate, former Navy SEAL and newly appointed Chief of External Affairs for AmeriCorps, the Corporation for National and Community Service, Carl Higbie, Fox News contributor and radio talk show host Tammy Bruce, and Democratic strategist Michael Morey. Good to have you three this morning.
Thank you.
It's going to be a great debate. Really unfortunate what happened this week in Spain. And I want to say, Tammy, you know, it's a wake-up call, but it's not. It is not a wake-up call because we've had too many of these. But you say it's a big reminder.
Well, it is. And look, since January, there have been 7 vehicular attacks in Europe, three in London. We know, of course, that we've got an issue not just with immigrants and refugees, but first-generation citizens of these countries. But this was also supposed to be gigantic. I mean, you had this explosion last month. There were 20 gas canisters that they intended to use. So what we saw, this horrific dynamic that we saw in Barcelona, was Plan B. And obviously, this is not just in Barcelona or in Spain. It's all throughout Europe. And this is the issue. This is why England's dealing with Brexit, and they want to be able to effectively secure their borders. So especially with the Middle East, as we have more gain with dealing with ISIS and they lose their ground there, they're returning home. They're spreading like a cancer and taking the jihad to Western civilization, to the Western world. And this is the other thing that's making it even more serious. And why President Trump, of course, was dealing immediately with the travel orders, dealing with border security, because of that outflow out of the Middle East into Western civilization. And of course, Barcelona is now, we've seen, dealing with part of that as well.
Yeah, you're right. They're not winning in the Middle East.
That's
where
right.
They are on the ground. They're winning in Western society, or at least they think they are, with these horrific attacks. And then we always take this conversation after this happens, Michael, to the borders, because you look at a place like Europe, it's closer to the Middle East, but they also have more lax laws when it comes to their border security. We had Dana Lash on our show, Fox and Friends, yesterday, and here was her take on securing our borders.
I think people are so tribalistic that unfortunately everyone wants to revert to their corners and claw it out rather than have an honest conversation about it. And one of the parts of that honest conversation is to discuss what will keep us safe, how we have to secure our borders. Right. It seems that we're one of the only sovereign nations on the entire planet that has to fight just to secure our borders, whereas everyone else, they can do it without a fight.
What did you make of that, Michael? Would you agree?
Well, look, so let's just deal in facts, though. So is international terrorism a real thing? Yes. In the United States of America, is foreign-born terrorism the main driver of U.S. terrorism? No, it's not. Domestic terrorism is. So no matter what you do on the border, it's not going to, I think it's by a 2-to-1 margin. Terrorism in the United States is generally driven by right-wing organizations, right-wing terror. I think in the last 8 years, between 2008 and 2006, of 215 cases of domestic terrorism, it was actually by right-wing groups, not by Muslim terrorists. And
what do you mean by right-wing groups?
It's sort of, very sort of fringe elements who either were religiously motivated, who were racially motivated, etc. And I think if you look at what happened in Wisconsin with the Sikh temple, if you look at what happened with Dylann Roof, if you look at most terrorist incidents in the United States, it's actually homegrown right-wing terrorism. It is not Muslim terrorism. Now, that's not to say it doesn't happen, but on a 2-to-1 margin, it's actually domestically motivated right-wing terror. So no matter what you do at the border, but I would also point out that the president, when he came into office, signed an executive order saying that he was going to put 5,000 more border agents on in the U.S. That hasn't happened either. So
I do want to get Carl Higbie is making some facial gestures. You've got to get in here. What are your thoughts?
Obviously, this is something that the border issue is something that needs to happen. And look, at CNCS, we deal a lot with the communities and things like this. We have to look at how this affects the safety of our communities. President Trump ran on a wall. That's what he's intended to do. He's going to do that. And this is what America wanted. And to your point that this is, right-wing terrorism is more prevalent than Islamic terrorism, that's just fundamentally not true.
That is, in the United States of America, that is absolutely true.
You're wrong.
No, that is absolutely true.
So the issue here is we are facing grave threats right now to our nation, and President Trump is uniquely qualified to prosecute these. We have to look at this rationally, not emotionally, and that's the problem with border security. Is historically we've looked at it so emotionally. I'd love to bring everybody we can into this country, give them a shot at the American dream, but the fact is we have to know who they are, where they're coming from, and how they're getting here.
Yeah, some good points.
And even to the points, let's say everybody is right, which I disagree with, but that doesn't mean that with the dynamic of what's happening in the Middle East, with the meltdown of ISIS's caliphate, if you will, that they're not traveling. Of course they are. are. And the people that went to train are returning, or at least moving into the Western civilization. We see that even with Al-Qaeda, which is still a factor, and ISIS. So regardless of what you think is happening here now, we have to prepare for what people and terrorists are planning to do starting from this day forward. And that includes, of course, national security. And we all have a responsibility to take that seriously and to be honest about what's coming our way.
And stop extremism from happening before people end up turning that direction.
Yeah.
All right, it's an important conversation. Michael, Tammy, Carl, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, it will continue on.